Hey guys, welcome to the chapter one mini lecture. So, we're gonna do these mini lectures, one per chapter. And in chapter one, that's pretty much the only content related video. In future chapters, there'll be a mini lecture, and then you'll notice the playlist continues with a bunch of more technical ones, videos that cover different topics from in the chapter to help fill in the gaps. These mini lectures will not be comprehensive. These will be overview kind of stuff, maybe with some real world applications. And then there'll be more videos after for the technical textbooky stuff. So, yep. You should watch these. Every single one. It's going to be a lot shorter than doing 3 hours of class in a week. Okay? But you should do it anyway. Anyway, so chapter one, I put together some materials for you that I think, well, some of it I put together, others I'm mooching from the publisher slides. But chapter one's like a big overviewy chapter. Yeah, I'm just going to share what they put together plus my additions to it. All right, so one thing I wanted to say, and I mentioned this in the other videos, but economics is the study of human decision making. And that means we can apply it to a lot of stuff. And so I put a list here, which you can pause the video and read it if you want to, but it shows you a lot of the subfields of economics. Right? There's development economics, which talks about low-income countries and how they can come out of their poverty. There's econometrics. It's one of my jams, where you apply math and stats and machine learning stuff to uncover and identify economic relationships. Economic history, environmental economics, experimental economics, game theory, health economics, industrial organization. This is my other jam. It's the study of imperfect markets, like when there's just a few big firms competing with each other, or when they have some form of market power that they can use to extract more dollars from your pocket. That stuff's interesting to me. International, labor, macro econ, micro econ, public econ. By the way, a lot of these were usually micro, but public econ, which is government spending and whatnot. There's tons. For instance, one question I ask students is, why is there a labor shortage? Crap. This graph's a few months old. I forgot to update this. I pulled up the graph. Now here's the current version. This is what we call a graph of our labor force participation rate. It says hey, of all of the working age adults in this country, what percentage are either working or wanting to work? And we see there's some big trends over time. Right? For a while, labor force participation was rising. A lot of that was because women were entering the workforce after the 60s and 70s. And so the adult working population grew as a share of the total adult population. And then over a while, it started to come back down, and then COVID hit. And if you look at all these little scratchy ups and downs, that's a big one. And here we are a couple years later, and we still have not bounced back to where we started. Okay. Fewer adults are working or wanting to work today than pre-COVID. And that's just a thing. Another graph that's kind of interesting and related is our unemployment rate, which right now we're near historic lows. Okay, I realize there's a bunch of inflation in the economy right now, and no one likes inflation. But the economy is not all bad right now. Unemployment rate is, of that labor force, what percentage of them can't find a job, even though they're out looking for it? And right now, it's 3.6%, which, aside from this 3.5% pre-COVID, which is basically the same number, You have to go back to the 50s to find anything that's better than that. 70 years, right? Or almost. Like we are at historically low unemployment rates right now. So there is good news in the economy. But those two graphs are really indicative of this labor shortage. We have fewer workers work like in the labor force than we used to, and and at the same time, probably related, they pretty much all have jobs. Right. All right. So, one question I could ask is why is there a labor shortage? I want to give you a second to think that through. Maybe even pause it. Why? Okay. I'm assuming you pause it. If not, let me just get to it. Here's a few things. The Great Resignation, these numbers are a couple months out of date, but we saw that there were several million less people in the labor force and that women were more likely to be leaving than men. Now, it's not all bad news. Half of the reduction is due to early retirements. Okay, COVID happened, old people got scared, they just like, I'm out. Okay, those ones probably aren't coming back, which means we lost lots of workers and they're not coming back. That's going to make a labor shortage. There were also, for a while, I don't think this is as much of a deal now because there hasn't been any stimulus for a while, but for a while there were lots of government benefits and stimulus and money being thrown around. And that arguably made some people less inclined to work. But that's a temporary thing. That's not a permanent thing. There is still a pandemic. COVID's still happening. This question. We have all this inflation going on right now. Wages are high and they seem to be rising. Um, are they going to go back down to where they were 2 or 3 years ago? Probably not. I think Pandora's box is opened. Now, with inflation, the value of a $20 an hour job is going to get smaller and smaller because those dollars are going to be worth less and less. But anyway, another take on this labor shortage is people have started a lot of businesses. New businesses were at a 3 decade high for a while. There's been a lot of one spouse returning to work while the other spouse doesn't. There's been a lot of surveys on mental health and burnout, and a lot of workers just checking out. And so, arguably, there's a lot of really big labor market changes. Probably a lot of these are permanent too, or at least long lasting. And so, this is just like an idea of some things we might be interested in. I've zoomed in on just a little bit of labor econ. Okay. I asked like one very broad question, and we could dig so much into every one of those topics. And all of these, let's see, basically just fit into this section of this subfield out of all of these and a bunch more. Okay, econ can talk about lots of things. All right, anyway, let's get to the book stuff though. I thought that was interesting. Maybe you will too. So, chapter 1, what's in it? Just a bunch of principles. It's like a long list. And what's a principle? It's like a guiding directive for how we see things. It's not like a hard and fast rule that always has to apply, but this is like our default settings for how economists think about things. So we're going to talk about micro versus macroeconomics. Microeconomics looks at how people make decisions and how they interact with each other. This can be people like you and me. This can be businesses. This can be labor markets. This can be whatever. If you can picture who is involved, like with a face, you're talking microeconomics. Macroeconomics is concerned with the overall ups and downs. Big issues in macroeconomics are like inflation, unemployment, growth, stuff like that. In microeconomics, we're interested in prices, we're interested in profit, we're interested in consumer well-being, we're interested in market quantities, all that kind of stuff. Let's see. So, in economy, we use that word economy. Hey, this is an economics class. I should probably mention it. I hate this textbooky definition. It's a system for coordinating society's productive activities. Basically, it's how people trade with each other. It's a system in which we do that. And most of the time, we've observed some sort of invisible hand, as it's called, which is the idea that you and me, we can be totally focused on ourselves and just doing what makes you and me better off individually without thinking of the other. But what's interesting is a lot of the times that's going to benefit everybody. For instance, my wife and I can both cook a dinner, but I work and she works and she's busy and I'm busy. And so we decide to go somewhere and buy food, right? That is just us being like, dude, I'm too busy to cook, so I'm gonna go buy some food. Today I went to Costco and bought like 7 ready-made meals. That's me pursuing my self-interest. Costco, they arguably don't care about me. I mean, like they value the customer and all, but they don't care about Matt Birch. Nothing against Costco, but they're there for the money. They're not there as a philanthropic organization trying to help econ teachers. But here's me doing something for my own selfish, I want to save some time and some effort. And there's them doing something. They just want to make a few bucks. And we didn't coordinate with each other, but us meeting together has made us both better off. And when society by and large engages in self-serving behaviors, it's interesting how often that leads to good results. A lot of times it does. Now, there will be situations where it doesn't. Okay, there will be a lot of them. In this class, we don't get to talk about a bunch of them because it's just a principles class. But there are a lot of market failures where self-interest leads to bad results. These are especially a big deal when you talk about public finance, right? When the government provides public goods or something, that's an answer to a market failure. There are market failures in environmental issues. There are market failures all over healthcare. There are market failures when businesses get too much market power. There are market failures when buyers and sellers don't have all the same information. Okay. Market failure is like a legit thing. It happens. When it doesn't happen, the whole the market leading to a good outcome, we'll sometimes refer to that as being an invisible hand. Okay, let's move on though. Let's get to these principles. There's a bunch of them. Okay, stuff that underlies individual choice. First, choices are necessary because your resources are scarce. What resources? Your time, your money, your amount of food in your cupboard, I don't know, whatever stuff you're dealing with is usually scarce. You can't do everything you want to because you don't have enough. For instance, I wish I could have 90-hour days. I would work a lot. I'd do some research. I'd work out. I'd read my book. I'd lay around and watch some Netflix. I'd cook up some super good food and then eat it leisurely. Go for a walk. Play with my kids, of course. But yeah, my day's only got 24 hours. I have to choose for this scarce resource how much of those 24 hours to sleep and how much to do everything else. So the only reason economics matters is because resources are scarce. If they weren't, people wouldn't have to make any choices. We would just enjoy everything without any trade-offs, and economists would become obsolete. Principle 2, the true cost of something is the opportunity cost. And that is what you have to give up in order to get something. So not the dollars you pay, but the total value of what you give up. So here they have an example of Mark Zuckerberg dropping out of Harvard, which is interesting. Okay. If you don't know, he's the guy who made Facebook, now Meta. And he had this multi-billion dollar, eventually hundreds of billions of dollar idea. And, you know, he could have let the world pass him by while he ducked his head down and finished his degree. Or that degree was going to cost him this multi-billion dollar idea, so he ditched his degree. Now let's do something less extreme. Let's talk about like you for a minute. You're at TLU, right? I forget what the sticker price is on tuition this year, but it's around 30 grand. Now for easy math, let's just say 25. Now, everyone watching this video probably has a different amount they actually pay because of the way financial aid works and different scholarships and different amounts of loans and different Pell Grants and whatever. Okay. You all probably have different prices you got to pay. But I'm just going to pick 25 for like a nice, easy number. So you pay 25 grand to go to school this year. That's not the opportunity cost though. Nope. Because you could go get a job at an Amazon warehouse, which is hiring for like $20 an hour plus a several $1,000 signing bonus. Gotta love that labor shortage. But let's just do the $20 an hour. If you have a 2,000 hour work year, that's about $40,000. So it's not just that you're paying 25 grand to be in school. You're also giving up a $40,000 job. So if you were to quit school now, you would actually be $65,000 richer because you'd be saving the 25 grand and earning 40. 65. That's closer to your actual opportunity cost of being here. Now, luckily, education pays off pretty good, especially if you do the kind of education that leads to good jobs, right? We can talk about that if you want. But yeah, hopefully, I mean, you want to consider this opportunity cost. It's the one that economists care about. And then we're going to compare costs and benefits. If the benefits of a behavior outweigh the costs, do it, right? You're going to pay 65 times 4-ish, so 260 grand to do this degree, give or take. But it's going to boost your lifetime earnings by well over $1 million. Benefits outweigh the costs. So even if it's crazy expensive, it's probably worth doing. Okay, principle 3. All right, how much is a decision made at the margin? Now, what do I mean? I don't just mean like cost, like benefits outweigh costs to do the thing. Like, should I go to school? Yes. But you could ask more questions. Like, how much school? 2-year degree? 4-year degree? Master's degree? PhD? You could ask, how many classes this semester? Within a semester, you could ask, how many hours should I study? Anytime it's a question of quantity, of how many, we're going to use marginal analysis, which is we're going to break down this complicated how many question into a series of simple yes or no's. And when we say we're making the decision at the margin, we mean we're looking at the next one and just seeing if the next one is worth doing. Okay, is it worth studying 1 more hour tonight? Well, I'm just going to look at that hour and decide if it benefits me more than it costs me. If it does, I should do it. And if it doesn't, I shouldn't. Because let's be honest, studying kind of has this diminishing returns thing where most people can't study endlessly. Like eventually the benefits don't outweigh the costs. You're better off getting sleep, getting a meal, or being a social human being. So you look at the next hour, just right now, should I keep going? Do the benefits outweigh the cost? If so, do it. Yeah. Another word you're going to see is incentive, which is the reward or like the reason people do something. What's your incentive for studying? Well, if you're a pure nerd, it's just to learn. But for the rest of you, it's to pass a test and get a good grade. Now, here's a marginal decision I have to come up with. Okay. You saw in my other videos, these book covers. Should I read another chapter tonight? That's a big one, right? Sometimes the benefits definitely outweigh the cost of an extra hour of sleep. Other times they don't. It partly depends on if I've read the book before and where I'm at in the book. But anyway, next principle. People usually respond to incentives and they will exploit opportunities to make themselves better off. Okay? That means if you change someone's environment, they'll respond and they usually do what's in their best interest. So, for instance, if you make education more, or so, let's say we subsidize education, make it cheaper, more people will usually go and get educated. If businesses were to suddenly stop requiring bachelor's degrees, there'd be a lot less incentive to get a bachelor's degrees and fewer people would probably get them. Like people respond to these changes as an incentives. Okay, so there's kind of the individual decision making. Now I want to pause here and I want to say I put a link in the syllabus for the Think Like an Economist podcast. I strongly recommend that you listen to that podcast. It's made by some authors of a textbook. I would just start at like episode 1. They condense the list of 5 principles. This book has like 10 or 11, but they condense it to 5. And they're going to really break down opportunity cost and the marginal analysis and everything. Really good. So I know it's not like cool to be like listening to econ stuff. Okay, I get it. But it's also not cool to be failing and miserable in a class. And listening to that would help a lot of you. So just a thought. Think Like an Economist podcast. It's legit. All right, let's crank through these other ones. Next principle, there are gains from trade. Right? This is back to like me and Costco and buying those meals. When we trade with each other, we both benefit. That's true whenever there's a voluntary transaction. Now, there can be redistributions and other problems, but there's going to be gains from trade for sure. Next, markets move towards equilibrium. What's an equilibrium? It's a point where everything becomes stable and no one's changing what they're doing. It's a point where no individual will be better off doing something different. Equilibrium just means everything settles down and everyone kind of gets, we're all in a groove, we're all in sync with each other, we're all doing what we want to do. And in most equilibrium and in most trade situations, people will specialize at the task you're good at performing, right? I, as an economist and as a teacher, am good at this job, teaching. At least when I'm in the classroom. I'll try to be good with this class too. As an economist, I'm also really good at working with data and trying to find causality and stuff. And so I got hired to specialize in that. And then when I need an electrician or I need a plumber, I'll just pay someone else to do that stuff, right? I specialize in my thing and I let them specialize in their thing, and we're all going to trade and we're all going to be better off for it. Yeah, society is a lot richer now that we can all do that than back in the day when we all like had like our own little farms and we all had to like grow our own food and make our own clothes and make our own tools and stuff. We're a lot richer now. Next. Now, this one introduces some opinion, okay? Should. Any sort of should, ought to, anything like that. And it introduces the possibility of debate. But I don't think this one's a bad one. Resources should be used efficiently to achieve society's goals. And what does efficient mean? It means that all opportunities to help someone, to make some people better off, without hurting other people. Okay? Anytime I can help Bob without hurting Sally, I should do it. Anytime I can help Sally without hurting Bob, I should do it. Resources should be used efficiently to achieve society's goals. We're just saying use our resources for the good of society. That actually becomes a pretty big deal later, especially with like market failures and when things don't get allocated efficiently, but whatever. Note, when we talk about efficiency, if equity is the idea of people getting their fair share, fairness and efficiency are totally different things. Efficiency just means we've used all our resources, but if Sally gets everything and Bob gets nothing, it's still efficient. Right? But economists often get fixated on efficiency because fairness comes with a lot of baggage. Usually people have different ideas of what it means for something to be fair, and it involves throwing in a lot more values. Now, that doesn't mean economists don't take sides on issues. We totally do. We're not a bunch of mindless, efficiency-loving robots. But in a principles class, we're going to be focused more on efficiency because it's a topic where there is a right and a wrong answer. Okay, so I can grade you on efficiency much more easily than I can grade you on some sort of other motivation for how a market should work. We'll get to a lot more of the equity talk in later classes, but for this class, we're going to talk more about efficiency. Now, cool things. Markets usually lead to efficiency, like equilibrium, usually efficient. And when it's not, we call it a market failure. When the market fails and we don't have efficiency, government intervention can, I'm not going to say will, because it really depends on what they do, but government policy can improve society's welfare. If a market is failing and is not efficient, then by definition of efficiency, that means it's possible to help one person without hurting anyone else. And that's a situation where the government could actually step in and help that person without hurting anyone else. Depends on the policy though, right? Anyway, all right. Last three, guys, we're almost there. Economy-wide interactions. So this is sort of switching to macro econ. When you spend money, someone else receives that money as income. When they spend money, someone else receives that money as income. One person's spending is another person's income. Now, on a macro level, that means if we get less income, we all start spending less money, which means people get less income, which means people spend even less money. And it's this vicious cycle that leads to something we call a recession. A recession comes with less business spending, more layoffs, more unemployment. And then later, when things start getting better, when people have more money, so they spend it, so that other people get more income, so they spend their money, so other people get more money, so it can get back up. This is why when COVID hit, one thing the government did was they started pumping money into the economy. Now, we'll get to a fiscal policy. They might have overdone it a bit. But at least the initial expenditures, the first round or two, had really good economic justification, where we could give people money so they spend it, so other people have money so they can spend it, and it creates this nice spiral to help keep the economy going. Anyway, I kind of talked about this in the last one a little bit. Sometimes the economy's overall spending doesn't match its productive capacity. We can overproduce, like right now, with record low unemployment and high inflation, This is an overproducing time, and the economy will stabilize when it slows down. During recessions, it can be underproducing, and it will stabilize once the economy speeds up. And then the last one, which I also alluded to, the government policies can change spending. So these last three, we're really going to come back to them in the macro unit. The other ones are all mostly micro kind of feel. All right, so there's kind of your overview for chapter 1. I think the mini lectures for the future chapters will be a little bit less structured. I'm not just going to follow slides the whole time. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to capture some of the big topics and let the videos and your own reading fill in the little gaps. With this chapter though, like there was no big topic, right? It was just like micro versus macro and 12 principles. So kind of had to do them all. Anyway, guys, there's chapter 1. Don't forget to do your homework. Okay. You need to do your learning curve. You need to do your end of chapter assignment. And you ought to also be checking the discussion forums. If anyone has questions, you can answer them and maybe get some bonus points. You can also ask your own questions there and maybe get help there. That's where we're going to simulate classroom learning, right? We'll all post in the same forum as if we're asking questions in class. All right, that's going to do it. Peace out, guys. Happy econing.